So now it is time for our last session of the day. Tokenization, does it equal democratization? In this discussion, we're going to talk about whether tokenization can really help to facilitate financial inclusion more broadly and the impacts it has for the world. We've got a really exciting panel for you, including Doney of SECURRENCY, Mc Gregor of DSTOQ, Will Peck, who's head of strategy and emerging tech at WISDOMTREE, and finally Christine Lee, who's one of the newest anchors for COINDESK, will be moderating the discussion. I will hand it over to you all. Enjoy.
Hi, everyone. I'm Christine Lee. Thank you for the warm welcome. Welcome to this panel on tokenization and whether that will lead to democratizing access to the global financial system. I am an anchor and host at COINDESK, and I produce a daily update on crypto news, and we are preparing to launch a full-fledged show next year. So this panel is called Tokenization, Does It Equal Democratization? Well, with Bitcoin, we see an efficient digital ledger for exchanging money that can be fractionalized down to Satoshis, 1/100th of a millionth of a single Bitcoin. But any asset can be fractionalized or tokenized. That includes real estate, art, intellectual property. And so that ownership can be represented through securities like stocks and bonds, which is a very exciting prospect because a digital security token could be launched, accessed, and fractionalized into smaller amounts of ownership anywhere in the world, giving people around the world greater access to the financial system as well as ownership opportunities. So I'm very excited to have this panel of guests to be talking about democratization amid tokenization. So if we could perhaps go down the row and you could introduce yourself. Will Peck, Head of Strategy of Emerging Technologies at WisdomTree Asset Management, please go first.
Thanks, Christine, and thank you to SDF for hosting this event and panel. It's a really well-produced event. I'm Will Peck. I'm Head of Strategy and Emerging Technologies at WisdomTree. We're a $65 billion global asset manager specializing in exchange-traded funds and exchange-traded products.
Great, thank you. Dan Doney.
Hi, I'm Dan Doney, the CEO of SECURRENCY, and I also want to echo Will's comments. Stellar's done a fantastic job here with a great lineup, so it's cool to be a part of it. SECURRENCY focuses on financial logistics and specifically on compliance tools designed to bring institutional value to investors globally. We do agree that tokenization equals democratization because you can take great institutional assets that used to only be available in the world's financial centers, and using technologies and blockchain and compliance, you can get them to really anybody, anywhere in the world.
Great, thank you, Dan. And finally, Mc Gregor, all the way from South Africa.
Thank you very much. And as well with the other panelists, thanks to STF, it's actually been an awesome event. I like all the stuff that's happening in between too. It's pretty cool. So yeah, I'm Mc Gregor, the CEO of DSTOQ, and at DSTOQ, really what we're trying to do is to make investing accessible and affordable to people in emerging markets. And through our app, users can essentially save money, invest into stock markets, and earn their way to financial freedom. And we have kind of two parts of our business. The one is the consumer-facing side, the app that people in emerging markets can download, and they can use it to buy shares, bonds, ETFs, so things like Tesla and Facebook. And then on the other side of our business, we also have a whole banking infrastructure set up in Europe, essentially, where we are basically an anchor for real world assets. So we're buying securities and the like, and then creating security tokens, which interesting opportunities that I'm sure we're going to elaborate on further in the panel.
Great, thank you, Craig. And I just want to remind viewers that you can ask questions. I'll be monitoring the chat to see if you would like to have anything answered from our panelists today. So actually the first question I wanted to go with was you, Craig. So how does tokenization lead to democratization? And you come from a very interesting perspective in South of Africa. So why don't you start off, and if you could add any real world use cases you're seeing.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually funny, the timing. I've got a perfect example, but I definitely do think that democratization can be achieved through tokenization, because ultimately what we're focusing on is allowing people that didn't have access to investing before to now have access to it. So coming from South Africa, I saw a problem in the world, which was just how difficult it is to basically transact across borders. To invest abroad is super expensive, and the fees are often super high. So you basically just cut out a huge part of the market. And we actually launched our app a couple months ago, and we've started marketing now this quarter. We've had about 15,000 downloads, and it's really awesome to be out there now and start to see some real world examples. And we actually had a user coming in on Friday last week, so very, very recently, who had some, we noticed he had some problems onboarding. He had managed to deposit money. He was in Nigeria, and he couldn't get through the KYC process, which was one of the things that he has to do first before he can invest. And so we actually got on the phone with him and wanted to chat about what his problems were. And the problem was he didn't have enough light at home. There was literally not enough light in his house to take a photo and do a selfie. So it kept failing. So we just chatted him through it and helped him. And the next day, which was a Saturday, like a couple of days ago, he was able to go through the process fine when he had some more light, had a couple dollars on there, and he was trading on the weekend a fraction of Tesla shares, I think directly with the user in South America, which is, I would say, one of the best examples of how tokenization creates democratization. We literally had a guy that was coming from a household that didn't have the best facilities, but could easily onboard to our app, and he could trade directly with someone in South America a couple dollars worth of Tesla. I mean, that's a pretty good example of tokenization and democratization. So yeah, it's awesome. It's wonderful to be in the space and see things like this starting to happen now. It's fantastic.
That's an incredible story. It really shows you how the world is becoming smaller with access to everyone around the world, with access to this technology. Dan, I wanted to head over to you. So tell us about your project and how that advances the objective of democratization. And also, can you provide any real world use cases?
Sure. So we're working with firms like WISDOMTREE to tokenize exchange traded funds or other institutional assets to make them available for in multiple markets. And one of the key enablers that's required is being able to meet the regulatory requirements in each of those markets. So thanks to the power of the blockchain, you can actually use tools. Stellar has a great framework called SEP8 and allows us to actually enforce in real time the regulations of multiple jurisdictions simultaneously. So there are many sometimes complex rules, especially when removing private or restricted assets from one user to another in multiple jurisdictions. We have the tools that actually take and codify the regulations. So this is the power of blockchain. It's really extraordinary. You can have tokens that know the rules and ensure that the rules are met, as opposed to banks who, when these are done through traditional processes, it's often done manually, person to person, consult with the lawyer, which is a very expensive transaction. As a result, this blocks a lot of folks out from participation, as Craig said. Now, one of the things that we've done working with Stellar and an international relief organization, we did a project to distribute relief funds. So this organization does loans for developing world projects. And their need was to make sure that there's traceability of that value as it moves down through, because oftentimes in relief situations, there's a lot of graft. Money goes where it's not supposed to go and into the wrong people's hands. But when you have compliance tools, actually, you can trace the flows and you can restrict the boundaries to make sure that it only goes to the people to whom it's intended, all the way out to citizens. So, and using similar to Craig's example, in West African settings, we were able to get tokenized value in native currency out to citizens very effectively and efficiently in this demo.
Wow, Dan, that's very interesting. We see a theme here of being able to connect people globally and with precision. But we have seen a sequence of boom and busts with the rise of ICOs. Companies around the world raised millions of dollars based on a white paper and a dream. Regulators clamped down and that crypto dream became a crypto winter. But some people made money, others lost. Retail investors without not much, perhaps some of them not much education and finance, only having access to the global financial system, found themselves in a quandary. So taking the perspective of users, how do tokenized securities help users? Is it actually a better product than traditional securities? Will, can you perhaps go into that question? Can you tell us a bit about your product and where that currently stands?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Christine. So I think your question is really the most important one. You know, I think a lot of us, particularly as we're focusing on innovation, have an urge to do something new and different, and you actually need to be focusing on what's better about it for end users, which is, I think, something we all constantly need to be reminding of for ourselves. So for us, I think there are three things that we see with tokenized securities that may be able to improve upon the existing experience that a lot of people have. First is cost. It's a lot of things that Craig and Dan both talk about. If you can do things for cheaper and pass those savings on to consumers, then you're going to be innovating and providing them a better user experience. You can think about this in the US with the asset management market, where there used to be, it's crazy to think about today, but high load mutual funds where you'd be paying 7% commission to access financial products. Today, you can get that for essentially free. That's a big innovation and something that tokenization needs to kind of carry on and do more with. The second would be around this technology, the merger of the banking and investing technology stacks. So today, for a lot of people, your Schwab account, your E-Trade account is totally different from your B of A or your JP Morgan account, which leads to some inefficiencies and different ways that people manage their financial lives, which is really just due to the technology and regulation a bit more so than I think how people actually think about it. I think blockchain and DLT actually allows the merger of that technology and those technology stacks, which is going to improve user experience. And the third thing, and this is something that Dan speaks about and is obviously, you know, close to his heart and what SECURRENCY is doing, is around global compliant distribution. Today, there aren't really such things as global securities. You have things that trade on New York Stock Exchange or NASDAQ here in the US, LSE over in London, maybe on the Hong Kong Exchange in Hong Kong. And they're really confined to their markets, trading in those market hours. It's actually very hard to cross-list securities and sell them to different markets. And if you're able to do that in a new and better way, where you can have essentially a law firm kind of within a token itself, you're going to open up distribution to a whole new channel of global investors, which we think is going to really help all financial service providers access more users.
Okay, thank you very much. But the internet, led to greater access to information, but also misinformation. Tokenization can lead to greater access to money, but it could also endanger investors. So what protections need to be put in place? And Dan, I'll give you that question.
Yeah, it is, and it was Will really pointed to this same question. We see this, as you mentioned earlier, Christine, in the ICO world. So when you have no controls on securities issuances, what happens next is exploitation of end users. And this isn't just 2017. All through history, anytime you open it up and say, let the predators prey on the innocent and folks who just aren't that sophisticated, you see problems. This is the reason for securities laws. So one of the principal things is to ensure proper investor protections. Securities laws are verbose, they're very complex, and oftentimes it takes lawyers to interpret those laws. As we worked with law firms regarding security token offerings, we'd find you go to 10 law firms and get 20 answers as to what the right pathway was. But there is a new way, and it is to actually codify these things and allow them to be interpreted by tokens. This allows you to take securities rules, which have the proper investor protections built into them, so that providers must provide right and proper disclosures, for example, so that folks can actually read about what it is that they own, can see quarterly reports as required as to what the value is. And with this, if those aren't met, then you can easily clamp down on distribution or other rules. So it's exciting, but investor protections are an essential component of the democratization of securities.
Yeah, that's super interesting that you can actually write the rules right into the blockchains. Well, FCC Chair Jay Clayton announced that he will step down at the end of the year. He's consistently rejected proposals for a Bitcoin exchange traded fund on the grounds of concerns about fraud and market manipulation. However, recently Clayton softened his stance by expressing openness to the idea of a tokenized ETF. Will, what has been your experience with the regulatory environment in the United States?
Yeah, I think what you referenced were really two separate issues. One is putting Bitcoin inside the existing 40 Act wrapper exchange traded funds. I think the SEC has been pretty clear about their concerns and issues with that. And it's something that, I think will get addressed over time, but they've been pretty clear on it. Where Chairman Clayton was expressing openness was around tokenized ETFs, like we talked about, really what we're talking about on this panel, around just, using kind of following first principles regulation in the United States, but using a new technology to do that. And I think the SEC and other global regulators have actually been pretty open-minded about it. I think all of us in industry have to answer some key questions around how this is actually going to be a better user experience, how we're actually going to be securing clients' money, how we're actually going to be protecting them from fraud. But I think if you're able to do that, they're going to be open to it. I mean, it's all about improving, at the end of the day, user experience, which is kind of within the realm of what these regulators are trying to achieve. So maybe it doesn't go quite as fast as some people might like, but at least in democracies, that's kind of how things work. And I think it's just part of a natural process.
Right. Well, Ripple has announced that they will start opening a Dubai headquarters, threatening to leave the US over uncertain regulatory concerns. Chris Larson, who's the co-chair and executive chair of Ripple, wrote an op-ed saying that there's a tech cold war going on between the United States and China. The US is not winning. So what are some of the greatest challenges in this regulatory environment? Dan?
Yeah, well, so it's what you see globally with regulators in their response here is they're seeing that they must regulate at first principles. And folks who are able to dig in, none of them want to give up investor protections or proper disclosures, et cetera. But you see some aggressive regulators who are forward-leaning, who are really beginning to push the boundaries. But regulators are responsible, securities regulators especially, for trillions of dollars of value. So they can't, they're careful, the SEC is very careful, and they're very sophisticated in their approach as we've been working with them closely over the past couple of years. They're not given much credit for the way they're approaching this. If they clamp down hard on these things, they'll kill innovation. But at the same time, clear bad actors who are taking advantage of the situation they are stepping in and stopping clear bad actors. At the same time, they're progressing with the rule sets. And again, I can tell you in working with them closely, they're looking at this very clearly. They're with a great deal of sophistication, as are other regulators. Now, what's powerful about the blockchain in the end is if your regulatory framework is not more competitive than the next country, guess where the value goes? So it is in the national interest of parties over time to make sure that they have the proper regulatory framework, not one that favors incumbents or favors the way things used to be, but actually really thinks about first principles and at the same time protects investors. The reason the United States is in the position that we're in is because of the effectiveness of Silicon Valley and our ability to effectively access to match capital to opportunity. Blockchain offers a better way even of doing that. And if the US doesn't produce a regulatory framework that's favorable for this, and again, there's an intent to do so, you'll see capital being matched to opportunity in other settings better. I think countries know this now, and that's why you see more speed in their approach.
Dan, just a follow-up question on that. Gary Gensler was tapped as a financial advisor to the Biden administration. Do you think a Biden administration might be more crypto-friendly for blockchain companies or looking to innovate in the United States?
So we've heard word of that. And so we're hopeful that that's true, that as there's a changing of the guard, there's certainly some folks who are more familiar with some core blockchain principles who are being considered for these positions. It needs to be seen. Again, I think the existing SEC is aggressive, moving in due course. And so, our hope is that will accelerate with the next administration. Good question. I don't have a good answer for you. I hope so.
No, it's good. It's but it's interesting to get people talking about it. We've seen some comment from Hester Pierce, who's also the crypto mom. She's been speaking about more quickness in developing regulatory certainty. So thank you for your comment. But Craig, you come from an interesting, more global perspective. How are you negotiating jurisdictional and regulatory barriers?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. The US has a different approach to definitely to regulations and to how people think about it. And sometimes when I see in the media, especially how people talk about regulators, it's like some people think they almost sound like a Terminator robot or something, you know. But at the end of the day, it's people. There's people that are working at the regulators and they're just doing their jobs. And in certain places, like Dan mentioned, you have regulators that are faster moving than others. And so for us, I think, and for all of our businesses, certainly in this space, regulation is just a part of business, and it is a good thing. It's there for investor protection, and no one can stop you. You know, so how do you protect investors? Well, create a good product. How do you protect investors? Make sure that you're not breaking the law and that you're actually thinking about policies and features and things that are helping investors at the end of the day. So how we did it was we just actively engaged with regulators and all over the world. Actually, we've been speaking to regulators for many years now in different jurisdictions, and they all have different approaches. But what you're starting to see, and it's the case already, our home jurisdictions, Liechtenstein in Europe, and there the regulators are very forward thinking and they're very they're active to engagement. So you can sit with them and have a meeting and tell them about everything that you're doing, and there's a legal framework in place that's part of the law now in that country, and it helps a lot to give some clarity and gives your companies basically certainty on what you can and can't do. And then you just have to comply with that. And if you do, then that's that. So regulation's kind of done. So you get to a certain point, I think, and I think the States is behind in this regard, but some places, some countries are getting to a point where it's not that difficult to comply with regulation, just like any industry. I mean, if you're making masks these days, there's also regulations around that. You just have to comply with it, you know? Of course, in finance, it's a bit more complicated, but it's not that bad of a thing. And some people, I think, maybe have the wrong impression of it. But yeah, I think it's totally surmountable.
Okay. Craig, a follow-up question to you. You know, I would be remiss at a Stellar conference not asking, why did you choose to work with Stellar in your implementation of tokenized securities?
Yeah, sure. Similarly, actually, to, you know, this is maybe looking at the world and what would be a good jurisdiction from a legal perspective. We also looked at when thinking about which technology would help us to basically you know, make investing accessible and affordable. We thought blockchain would be a good use of technology, and then we looked at a bunch of different blockchains, and ultimately we picked Stellar for a few reasons. First of all, the speed, like the transactions are super fast. So our whole approach is basically abstracting away the whole complexity of blockchain, right? So the fact that Stellar is so fast means that in our app, the users don't even know that blockchain is part of it. Another reason is the fact that it has, it's not Turing complete, which is what Ethereum is. Ethereum, you can do smart contracts and things. You can do more complicated, basically programmatic things to it, but it also means there's less security and there's some other downsides that come with it. Stellar just has set features and functions, and those are exactly what we need to basically issue assets and then have them tradable. And the fact that there's the DEX, the decentralized exchange, also built in makes a massive difference. It helped us get to market much faster than having to look at building those things ourselves. So it really just is a blockchain built for financial companies at the end of the day. And especially for us as a DApp, you know, basically helped us a lot to have a lot of the core features we would have built ourselves anyway. They were already there and available on Stellar.
Great, thank you. Another question from the audience. Well, Dan, same question. Why did you choose to work with Stellar? And a question from the audience being, does Stellar being a nonprofit put Stellar at an advantage?
Well, so echoing Craig, they are faster, better, cheaper. So those are nice core elements. The DEX is an awesome capability, the decentralized exchange. But, and maybe because they're a nonprofit, they're friendly. They're super easy to work with, which, you know, is as a small tech company, we like working with folks who are so easy and so solid as partners. There's a couple other core reasons. In that engagement, we've worked closely with their engineers on some of these regulatory components that are quite complex, that have been built into the protocol, and some additional ones that are coming soon into the protocol. And as Craig mentioned, the fact that these are security reviewed through a pretty comprehensive process makes them safe and secure. But one of the features is SEP 8. There's a new SEP coming that that will even extend those capabilities. SEP 8 is a function that allows you to consult with policy before making a transaction. And that allows you to insert global regulatory rules into the transaction itself. And then there's a second piece for clawback capabilities that allows you to perform transfer agent functions that many regulators require.
Okay, excellent. This is a question for you, I think, Craig. Can we use your app in Canada? I use CoinSquare and Coinbase, and that works well.
Unfortunately, not at the moment. No, we're really focusing on our company's mission, which is to help people in emerging markets. And in the States and Europe and Canada, you have quite a lot of options already. And like the story I said earlier of someone in Nigeria, they literally don't have those options at all. So we're focusing and we're very mission driven to help people in emerging markets specifically. We might down the line look to, expand into other more developed markets, but I think the world is a very big place, and it certainly helps to have, a focus and a drive that helps us drive our whole company kind of every day, is to really help those end users. And so Canada is not really on our list or our plan for now, unfortunately. We would love to, but not right now.
And maybe just one last question I'm going to put in there. What is needed for this industry to scale? What is needed for mass adoption to occur? And this links to an audience question about when the EU-US regulatory landscape will adjust and allow individuals to invest in tokenized securities. Will, if you could?
Yeah, I think something we didn't talk a little bit about is I think we all need to do a better job of making these innovations applicable for just regular people. I think it's very easy to get excited about stuff that's happening in DeFi and whatnot if you're kind of in the crypto universe and kind of sophisticated with it. And that's great and it's exciting, but most people aren't like that. Most people aren't going to care about a public or private key or want to even get down that path. They just want to know, what is this doing for me and how can I use it easily? So I think one of the things is just going to be all of us figuring out better ways to communicate that and to meet kind of most users where they are instead of asking them to come to us in kind of the crypto space.
Okay, great closing thoughts. That about wraps up our session today. But thank you, Will, thank you, Craig, thank you, Don, for joining us. I'm really excited about the direction that tokenized securities are headed. It reminds me of back in the internet when people started exchanging information, writing, self-publishing for the first time, and we got a glimpse of people globally and information globally. And now we're seeing the same thing happen in finance, and it's still very early days. So once again, thank you for your insights and thank you for joining us out there on this panel.